The gold ring stayed in Eleanor Whitmore's coat pocket all the way from Boston to Wyoming. She never wore it. Not on the train platform, where coal smoke rolled thick as river fog. Not while her mother's last words followed her through the station, noise like a needle through cloth. Not while the conductor called final boarding and men in dark coats shouted over trunks, tickets, and steam. The ring had been chosen for her by a man who looked at marriage the way bankers looked at railroad shares. Useful, profitable, permanent. Eleanor kept one gloved hand around it as she stepped onto the westbound train, not because she wanted to remember him, but because she needed to remember what she had escaped. 3 days later, Blackwater Ridge, Wyoming, greeted her with wind hard enough to sting tears from her eyes. The little station sat alone beneath a pale gray sky, surrounded by snow-covered earth and fences half buried in drifts. Eleanor stepped down carefully onto the wooden platform, her boots slipping on packed ice. Nobody waited for her. That hurt more than she expected. All her life, somebody had always been waiting. A driver, a servant, a mother with instructions, a fiancé with expectations. Now there was only wind moving through the telegraph wires and a station sign swinging above the office. The clerk looked up through the window. "You Ellie Brooks?" Eleanor hesitated. Her real name stood behind her like a locked house. "Yes, sir. Cowboy's late. Road drifted shut near Miller's Creek." She nodded and sat beneath the awning with one small suitcase, one false name, and a future thin as paper. Snow collected along the shoulders of her dark blue coat. Evening lowered slowly over the tracks. For the first time in her life, nobody in the world knew where to find her. By the time Caleb Hayes arrived, the station windows had frozen white at the edges. The door opened with a groan, and a tall man stepped inside covered in snow from hat brim to boots. He removed his hat slowly, brushing frost from the crown. "You Ellie Brooks?" His voice was low, roughened by cold. "Yes." He nodded once. "Road washed over near the creek. Took longer than I figured." He was not handsome in the polished way Boston men tried to be. He was weathered, with dark hair, light stubble, and tired hazel gray eyes. His coat smelled faintly of leather, cedar smoke, and horse sweat. Honest smells. He took her suitcase. "Travel light." "I suppose I do now." Something almost like a smile touched his mouth, then disappeared. Outside, the wagon lanterns swung softly in the dark. Eleanor climbed up beside him, gathering her coat tight around her knees while the horses shifted against the traces. For half an hour, they rode without speaking. The Wyoming sky spread wide above them, enormous and empty. Pine trees passed like shadows. Snow glowed pale beneath the moon. "You got family back east?" Caleb asked at last. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the ring in her pocket. "Not anymore." Caleb nodded as if he understood the shape of that answer without needing the story. "Name's Caleb Hayes," he said. "You own the ranch?" "Bank owns most of it these days." He kept his eyes on the road. "Marriage paperwork keeps them from taking the rest till spring." There it was. No charm. No romance. Just truth, placed cleanly between them. Oddly, Eleanor found herself grateful. No one in Boston had ever spoken so plainly to her. Far ahead, a single cabin window glowed in the dark, warm against the Wyoming night. The cabin sat at the edge of a wide valley where snow gathered deep against fence posts, and the wind never seemed to stop moving. Caleb pulled the wagon beside the porch and climbed down first. "Careful on the steps," he said. "Ice builds near the boards." Inside, heat rolled from a cast-iron stove. The room was small. One table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with jars, a wash basin, a forgotten upright piano near the far wall beneath a dust-covered cloth. Everything plain, everything orderly, yet the silence felt heavy, as if the cabin had been holding its breath for years. "There's stew on the stove," Caleb said. "You cooked. Neighbor woman brought it yesterday." They ate at the table beneath lamplight. The stew was simple, thick with potatoes and beef, but warmth settled deep inside Eleanor as she ate. She had sat at long tables in Boston beneath chandeliers and crystal. None of them had ever felt this safe. After supper, Caleb carried the bowls to the basin. "Wedding papers get signed tomorrow in town. Judge handles it simple." "Simple sounds fine." He dried his hands slowly. "You should know something before then." Eleanor looked up. "This arrangement stays practical," he said. "You'll have your room. I'll have mine. Nobody here needs pretending." The word should have sounded cold. Instead, they sounded tired, like rules built by a man who had learned not to expect tenderness. Eleanor wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I'm not looking for pretending either. For the first time, Caleb looked at her fully. Not at her coat, not at her suitcase, not at the false name. At her. Outside, snow pressed against the cabin walls, and the stove crackled softly between them. If gentle stories of love, memory, and second chances have a place in your heart, consider subscribing. There are more quiet stories waiting under the sunset. Morning came pale and quiet. Caleb was awake before dawn, feeding the stove and pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. Eleanor found breakfast already waiting. Eggs, bacon, and bread toasted near the fire. He bowed his head briefly before eating. Not for show, just habit. They rode into Blackwater Ridge under a sky the color of pewter. The town was little more than a church, a feed store, a mercantile, and stubborn smoke rising from chimneys. People watched as the wagon passed. Eleanor felt their curiosity through the cold. The judge's office was narrow and overheated. The ceremony lasted less than 5 minutes. No flowers, no music, no mother's approval, no man treating her like property dressed in lace. Only 2 signatures, a quiet yes from each of them, and snow tapping gently against the window. When they left, Caleb set a small parcel beside her on the wagon seat. She looked down. What's this? Gloves, he said, eyes on the road. Your hands looked cold. The gloves were thick wool, lined with rabbit fur, warm already from being carried inside his coat. Eleanor touched them gently. No one had noticed her hands in a very long time. The first week passed like snowfall settling across open ground. Quiet, gradual, hard to measure until everything looked different. Eleanor learned that ranch mornings began before sunrise. She learned that coffee tasted stronger in Wyoming. She learned that wind had moods. She learned that Caleb spoke mostly through doing. A loose latch on her bedroom window was repaired without mention. Fresh firewood appeared beside the door before storms. When she burned biscuits black enough to smoke up the kitchen, Caleb only opened the window and said, "Biscuits cook faster up here. Air's dry in winter." "I believe I've declared war on your kitchen," she said. This time he almost smiled. The cabin began changing around her. At first, it had looked like a place arranged for one person who expected no company. 1 cup nearest the stove, 1 chair worn beside the fire, 1 extra room shut up against drafts. But slowly, Eleanor left traces. A blue cloth beneath the coffee pot, a folded blanket over the settee, a jar of dried flowers near the window, the old gold ring, hidden inside a small tin in her bedroom drawer. She could not throw it away. Not yet. It was proof of the life she had refused. And refusal, she was learning, could be a kind of beginning. One snowy afternoon, while Caleb repaired fencing along the south pasture, Eleanor cleaned the corner near the piano. Dust lifted in pale clouds beneath the winter light. She uncovered the keys and pressed one softly. The note came out crooked. Still alive. She sat on the bench and tried another. Then another. Back in Boston, music had belonged to parlors, polished smiles, and women watching each other through crystal glasses. Here, one imperfect note in a quiet cabin sounded more honest than any applause she had ever received. She did not hear Caleb return. He stood just inside the door, snow on his shoulders, listening. Eleanor stopped at once. "I'm sorry. I should have asked." Caleb looked at the piano. "Didn't know it still worked. Would you rather I didn't play?" He removed his gloves slowly. "No, just 1 word." But it warmed her all evening. Later, while snow blurred the windows white and Caleb repaired a bridle strap at the table, he spoke without looking up. "My mother played." Eleanor stilled. It was the first thing he had offered about himself. "Evenings after supper," he said. "Old hymns mostly." House sounded different then. "What happened?" His fingers paused on the leather. "Fever took her first. Father followed 2 winters later. After that, the house got quiet and stayed that way." Eleanor looked toward the piano. "I can play again tomorrow." Caleb's eyes lifted to hers. That would be all right. By February, the cabin no longer felt borrowed. Eleanor woke before sunrise and knew where her shawl would be. She knew which floorboard creaked. Near the pantry. She knew Caleb took coffee black unless the morning was bitter. Then he added a spoonful of sugar and pretended not to. He spoke more now. Not much. Storm coming. Fence held. Coffee's better today. Small sentences, but each one felt like kindling added to a fire. One afternoon they rode into town for supplies. Inside the mercantile, a bolt of deep green wool caught Eleanor's eye. She touched it once, then stepped away. That evening, back at the cabin, Caleb handed her a brown paper parcel. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was the green wool, a tin of lavender tea, and a packet of worn piano music. Eleanor sat very still. "You remembered?" Caleb stacked wood beside the stove. "You looked at it twice." That was all. Yet her throat tightened. The gift was not grand. That was why it mattered. No bargain hid inside it. No expectation. No ownership. Only attention. That night, Eleanor played one of the old songs while Caleb sat by the fire cleaning mud from his boots. Halfway through, he stopped working and listened. When the final note faded, he said quietly, "House sounds better with music in it." Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, Eleanor no longer felt like someone passing through. Near the end of February, rain began to soften the snow. Caleb came home late one evening, soaked through from checking cattle near Miller's Creek. Eleanor turned from the stove the moment he entered. "You're late." He paused, pulling off one glove. "Road washed muddy." "I was worried." The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Caleb looked at her a long moment. Then he accepted the coffee she offered. "Thank you." It was the first time he said it plainly. Later, rain tapped on the roof while Eleanor mended his torn work shirt, and Caleb sorted bank papers beneath lamplight. "Deadlines extended till summer," he said. "That's good, isn't it? Means I've got till summer to save the ranch." His voice was calm, but weariness sat beneath it. Eleanor lowered her sewing. "My father discussed money every night at dinner," she said. "Business. Reputation. Marriages." Caleb looked up. "My engagement was arranged before I was 24. He was wealthy. Respectable. My father admired him." "Did you love him?" Eleanor gave a small, humorless breath. "I don't believe he ever wondered whether I could." Rain moved softly over the roof. "Everything in Boston was decided before I entered the room," she continued. "What to wear? What to say? Whom to marry? Even happiness felt scheduled." Caleb listened without interruption. Then he said, "Sounds lonely." Eleanor's eyes filled before she could stop them. No one back east had ever named it so simply. "Yes," she whispered. For the first time in years, she felt understood. March brought mud, foul water, and trouble. Caleb returned from town near sunset with supplies and a folded newspaper tucked beneath his arm. He was quieter than usual. Eleanor noticed at once. "What is it?" He placed the newspaper on the table. A notice stared up from the page. Eleanor Whitmore, missing from Boston society. Information requested. Her father had offered a reward. The room seemed to shrink around her. Caleb stood near the door, giving her space. "I figured the name wasn't real," he said. "I meant to tell you." "I know." That kindness nearly hurt worse than anger would have. Eleanor sat slowly. "My father will send people. He doesn't like losing control of things." Caleb poured coffee into 2 cups. "You planning to leave?" The question was steady, but something guarded had returned to his eyes. Eleanor understood then that Caleb had spent most of his life preparing for people to leave before they did. She folded the newspaper shut. No, the answer came quickly. Truthfully. Caleb set the cup beside her. "Then the paper doesn't matter much." She told him everything. The engagement. Thomas Pembroke. The invitations. The morning she realized every year ahead of her had already been handed to someone else. Caleb stared into the fire when she finished. "My father used to say land can trap a man same as anything else," he said. Then he looked at her. "Difference is, you got off the train before it was too late." Spring came slowly, 1 green inch at a time. Eleanor opened the windows during the day. Fresh air moved through the cabin, carrying birdsong and pine. Her books rested beside the piano. Her dresses hung near Caleb's coats. The ranch dog slept beside her chair as if he had settled the matter of belonging himself. Then, one April morning, unfamiliar horses entered the yard. Caleb stepped onto the porch first. 2 men climbed down from a wagon wearing city coats unsuited to Wyoming mud. Eleanor knew. One immediately. Thomas Pembroke. He removed his gloves with practiced control. Eleanor. Her real name sounded strange in his mouth. Caleb stood beside the porch rail, silent and still. "Your father has searched half the country," Thomas said. "This has gone far enough. I wrote to say I was safe." Thomas glanced at the cabin, the muddy yard, the weathered barn. "Safe is not the same as suitable." Caleb moved 1 step forward. "Not aggressive. Just enough. Thomas looked at him. Whatever financial arrangement exists here can be settled properly. Caleb's voice was quiet. She is not for sale. The yard went still. Eleanor looked at him, and something fierce and tender moved through her chest. No one had ever stood beside her without trying to decide for her. Thomas turned back. You don't belong in a place like this. Eleanor looked toward the cabin window glowing with morning light. She thought of coffee before sunrise, music after supper, gloves warmed inside Caleb's coat, a man who noticed twice and asked nothing in return. I think, she said softly, this may be the first place I ever truly did. Thomas left before sunset. His wagon disappeared down the muddy road, while spring light stretched long across the grass. Eleanor stood on the porch long after the wheels faded. Caleb came out carrying 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. For a while, they watched the valley. You could still go back, he said. I know. Wouldn't blame you. She turned toward him. Would you want me to? Caleb looked down at his cup. Want hasn't got much to do with it. The answer was rough. Honest. Eleanor understood. The arrangement had always been supposed to end. The marriage had been paperwork, shelter, practicality. Only somewhere between snowstorms and piano music, it had become something else. She looked at the gold band on her finger. Caleb had never asked her to wear it. The judge had given it to them from a small drawer, plain and simple, nothing like the heavy Boston ring still hidden in her tin. This one felt natural now. You still think this is only an arrangement? She asked. Caleb looked at her with hope he clearly did not trust. I think you deserve to choose your own life. Eleanor set her coffee on the porch rail. I already did. He went still. I chose. This cabin, she said. The mornings. The music. The quiet. Her voice trembled. And I chose you. Wind moved softly through the cottonwoods. Caleb reached for her hand slowly, as if afraid one wrong movement might wake him from a dream. His fingers closed around hers. Rough. Warm. Home. Eleanor, he said. He spoke her true name like something precious, not owned. That night, after Caleb slept, Eleanor opened the tin in her drawer and took out the Boston ring. It looked too bright in her palm. Too cold. The next morning, she walked to the creek behind the cabin while sunrise spread gold over the water. Caleb found her there with her coat wrapped tight against the chill. She held the ring between 2 fingers. I carried this all the way from Boston, she said. Caleb stood quietly beside her. I thought I kept it to remember what I ran from. But maybe I kept it because part of me believed they could still claim me. She looked at him. I don't want it in this house anymore. Caleb nodded once. No speech. No advice. Eleanor turned and placed the ring carefully on a flat stone beside the creek, not throwing it, not hating it, simply setting it down where the morning light could touch it one last time. Then she took Caleb's hand and walked back toward the cabin. By autumn, the valley had turned gold. The ranch was saved. The bank papers arrived in August, and Caleb read them twice before finally smiling fully across the kitchen table. Eleanor remembered that smile every time she passed the stove. The barn roof had been repaired. Fresh fencing lined the north pasture. The cabin no longer felt like shelter from loneliness. It felt like the answer to it. One October evening, rain drifted softly against the roof while soup simmered on the stove. Eleanor kneaded bread at the counter with flour on her sleeves. Caleb entered with firewood and stopped just inside the door. What? She asked, smiling without looking up. Nothing. But his voice held the kind of tenderness no one could hide. After supper, Eleanor sat at the piano while Caleb repaired tack beside the fire. The old song moved softly through the cabin. Outside, rain slipped down the windows. Inside, the lamplight turned everything warm. Later, they stepped onto the porch wrapped in the same wool blanket, 2 coffee cups cooling on the rail. Below them, the creek caught the last light of sunset. And there, on the flat stone beside the water, the old Boston ring still rested, no longer hidden, no longer carried, glowing briefly in the gold evening before the shadow of the cottonwoods covered it. Eleanor leaned her head against Caleb's shoulder. She had not run away from her life. She had finally found it. If this story reminded you of someone who chose peace over expectation, or someone who became home to you in quiet ways, share their memory in the comments. Before you go, there is one more gentle story of love and memory waiting for you.